It started like any other day for Officer Harris: routine patrol, a quick coffee, and back to the streets. But this time, his instincts led him to a man parked just outside the precinct in a sleek black car. The man, dressed casually, seemed out of place, sparking Harris' suspicion. After a brief interaction that escalated quickly, Harris made the call to cuff him, convinced he was dealing with a suspect who didn't belong there. What Harris didn't realize was that this wasn't just any man. He was about to face a reality check so shocking it would leave the entire precinct buzzing. Because the man in handcuffs, he wasn't a suspect. He was the new precinct chief, Chief Daniels, on his first day. Stay tuned as we unravel the twists in this jaw-dropping encounter that challenges perceptions and delivers an unexpected lesson in humility and humanity. As Officer Harris led the man toward the station doors, a small crowd of onlookers began to form. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene, their murmurs growing louder. Harris ignored them, focused on what he thought was a job well done. The man in handcuffs remained calm, almost too calm, which only added to Harris' irritation. "You're awfully quiet for someone caught trespassing," Harris muttered. The man simply smiled, saying nothing, as if he knew something Harris didn't. Inside the station, officers paused mid-task, their eyes widening at the sight. One of them, Sergeant Miller, hurried over. "Harris," she whispered urgently, her voice laced with panic. "What are you doing?" Harris frowned, confused. "Just bringing in someone who shouldn't be here," he replied confidently. Miller's face turned pale. "Harris, that's Chief Daniels. He's your new boss." Harris froze, his grip on the handcuffs tightening. The room fell silent. The realization hit Harris like a ton of bricks. He looked at the man he'd handcuffed, Chief Daniels, and saw the calm expression shift slightly into one of quiet authority. Harris fumbled with the keys, unlocking the cuffs as quickly as his trembling hands would allow. "Sir, I didn't realize," he stammered, but Daniels raised a hand, silencing him. By now, every officer in the precinct was watching, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. Daniels rubbed his wrists, inspecting them briefly, before locking eyes with Harris. "Let's take this to my office," he said, his tone measured but firm. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked toward the hallway, leaving Harris no choice but to follow. As they entered the office and the door closed behind them, Harris braced himself for the inevitable reprimand. But instead of yelling, Daniels leaned back in his chair and asked, "Do you know why this happened?" Harris was caught off guard, unsure how to answer. Outside, the officers exchanged glances, the silence in the room amplifying the weight of the moment. Harris stood there, unsure if he should speak or stay silent. The chief's question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Daniels didn't break eye contact, waiting for a response. Finally, Harris managed, I thought you looked suspicious, sir." His words sounded hollow even to himself. Daniels nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Suspicious," Daniels repeated, almost to himself. He let the word linger before leaning forward. "Tell me, Officer Harris, what made me look suspicious? Was it the car, my clothes, or was it something else?" Harris shifted uncomfortably, his mind racing. He knew where this was headed, but didn't know how to stop it. Outside the office, the station buzzed quietly. Whispers floated through the air, officers speculating about what was being said behind that closed door. Some looked worried, others intrigued. Back inside, Daniels stood, his calm demeanor replaced by something sharper. "You made a decision based on assumptions," he said, his voice low but cutting. "And now you're going to explain why." The tension in the room was palpable, and for Harris, it felt like the walls were closing in. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The chief wasn't letting him off the hook, not this time. Harris finally found his voice, though it trembled as he spoke. "Sir, I thought I was protecting the precinct. I didn't mean any disrespect." But Daniels didn't seem convinced. He paced the small office, his movements deliberate, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Protecting the precinct," he said, his tone sharp. "From what? From someone who doesn't look like they belong? Do you even realize what kind of message that sends?" Before Harris could respond, there was a knock at the door. Daniels paused, exchanging a glance with Harris before calling out, "Come in." The door opened, and Sergeant Miller stepped inside, her expression tense. "Chief, I think you need to see this," she said, holding up a phone. Daniels took the phone, and his face hardened as he watched the video playing on the screen. It was footage of the incident outside, the handcuffing, the crowd, Harris's demeanor. It was already circulating online. The comments were brutal, questioning not just Harris's judgment, but the culture of the entire precinct. Daniels set the phone down, his jaw tight. "This is bigger than you, Harris," he said, his voice like steel. "Now we're all under scrutiny. Every decision, every action." Harris felt his chest tighten. The stakes had just skyrocketed. What had started as a personal mistake was now threatening to spiral into a public relations nightmare for the precinct. Daniels leaned forward, his eyes locked on Harris. "What we do next will define how this ends, for you, for me, and for everyone in this building. So I'll ask again, do you know why this happened?" Harris hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on him. He knew he couldn't dodge it any longer. I made an assumption, sir. I didn't stop to think. I just reacted," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniels studied him for a long moment, the silence in the room stretching uncomfortably. Finally, he nodded, as if that was the answer he'd been expecting. "You see, Harris," Daniels said, his tone softer but no less firm, "this isn't just about you or me. It's about what happens when people stop seeing others for who they are and start making judgments based on fear or bias." He leaned back in his chair, letting the words sink in. Harris felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wanted to defend himself, to explain, but he knew it would only make things worse. Then Daniels surprised him. "I'm not here to end your career," he said. "I'm here to make sure you learn from this, and that others do too." He slid the phone with the viral video across the desk toward Harris. "You're going to help me address this, publicly. Together, we're going to turn this into a lesson, not just for you, but for everyone watching." Harris blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, you want me to?" "Speak," Daniels finished. "Own your mistake. Show people that change starts when we face our flaws head-on." Harris nodded slowly, realizing the chief wasn't just giving him a second chance, he was giving him an opportunity to grow. But just as the tension began to ease, Daniels added, "And Harris, one more thing." Harris looked up, unsure of what was coming next. "I wasn't just sitting in that car waiting for trouble," Daniels said with a faint smile. "I was watching you, evaluating you. This was your test, and it's not over yet." Harris' eyes widened, the weight of the revelation hitting him like a tidal wave. The chief had been testing him all along. Harris felt his chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't just nerves. It was realization. The chief had been testing not just his judgment, but his character. Slowly, Harris nodded, his respect for Daniels growing. "I understand, sir," he said, "and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Over the next few days, Harris and Daniels worked together to address the fallout. In a public statement, Harris owned up to his actions, acknowledging his assumptions and promising to do better. Daniels spoke as well, using the moment to highlight the importance of accountability and growth within the force. The community responded with a mix of skepticism and hope, but it was clear the precinct was taking steps to rebuild trust. As the days turned into weeks, Harris found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. He knew this moment had changed him, not just as an officer, but as a person.